Hi, Fatih.
Hi, Gail. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Uh, 5 p.m. here, so getting to the end of the day.
Oh, it's
So,
late. Yeah. This is the kind of meeting where, I'm in Central time zone, and most
mm,
of the people, a lot of people are on, a lot of people we work with are on West Coast, so they're Pacific. So it's 8 a.m. for them, but for me it's 10 a.m. and I already did a little workout, so this is the only time a meeting is like perfect for me because it's, I have a little time to start the day.
yeah, I think Central seems to be like best time in open source. I don't know, like you could at least, have time for
Yeah.
you before you start your day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
That's okay.
thanks for joining, Kate.
And I'm only here for the first half hour, but I had the time free, so I figure I'd jump on and be available for you guys.
Let me put.
I think for anyone who hasn't met me, I'm your program manager for CDF. I work for Linux Foundation. I usually have a conflict at this time, so I don't usually come to this call, but I have half an hour free, so I wanted to just jump on and say hi.
Thanks for joining. Yeah, I've seen your mails and everything, but actually, I think I was in stock meetings, so you join to those meetings pretty regularly. So,
Okay, awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm in a lot.
So I put the link to the HackMD document where we keep the agenda and minutes. If you could type in your name so we know who joined the meeting, and so we start with the agenda followed up by action items.
Hi, I'm going to introduce myself as it seems
Oh yeah,
everyone has introduced. Just you don't realize I'm just hugging here. So I'm Victor Martinez. This is my very first time attending your meeting. So I work for Elastic, and I've seen this group is also working with the definition of the CI/CD, the terminology, vocabulary. I also saw the Jenkins X already enables some observability for the project itself, which is really exciting. So we have a plugin for Jenkins, and I would like to listen or see if there is any specific note about aligning or normalizing the terminology regarding CI/CD, because this is really important as well to have a same common schema for everyone. So this is the area of interest. I would like to listen a little bit as well. That's me.
thanks a lot for joining. I'm sure you found the Rosetta Stone, we call Rosetta Stone, in our repository. And just so you know, we have best practices SIG. They also work on glossary, like more general CI/CD terms as well, which you may want to look at. I can put the links on chat, which you can check them out. Apart from that, if you want to, present your ideas about this interoperability area or what you are working on, we can, add you to our backlog, and you can present here and get feedback about what we are doing and find other people who you might want to collaborate with.
Good. Sounds good.
Now, I also see Gopinath as well. Maybe you want to introduce.
Hi, I'm Gopinath Ribala. I'm a CTO of Opsumix. So we are one of the core contributors of Spinnaker, and we have a bunch of customers with Spinnaker. We are also building an intelligence layer on top, basically that requires all the data, and I saw the interoperability is the right place where we are working on the same issues. So I thought I'll join in and see what we can do to contribute and also learn.
Thanks. So let me share my screen. I think I haven't missed anyone. And share. I hope you can see the browser window with HackMD. Okay, good. So the agenda for today is a bit light because we have Kate with us talking about SPDX, and we will continue an open discussion on how we can collaborate. But before that topic, we have a few logistic type of topics. And the first one is, as usual, action item review, followed up by a quick question about what to do with our next meeting. And then another topic is about CDCon. The schedule was announced this week, if I'm not mistaken. So we can talk about that, and maybe Tracy, you want to give some highlights about some of your plans. And then we'll have SPDX discussion, and if the time permits, we can take a look at policy-driven CI/CD stuff, which we had some contributions a few weeks ago. And if you have a short topic you want to bring up, we can take it before we start the SPDX or that as well. The longer topic, then we will see how much time we will have for that. So the first action item was on Emil to add notes on mandatory and optional data in standardized metadata document. I'm not sure if Emil is with us. Let me see Emil. Oh, Emil, you are there.
So I did that already during the meeting just the last 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
so
you
it should
already
have
did
been
that.
done. Yes, there is
Okay.
a comment, or there was at least.
Oh, yeah, there
comment
is
in the
one
document
comment here,
about it.
yeah.
And I guess I added some more comments somewhere, I think.
Here, yeah.
So they should be there. No.
Okay, so thanks for section. I think thanks for that. Oh, you already commented on. So that was the only action item. And the next topic is the next SIG Interoperability meeting. So as you know, SIG Interoperability meets first and third Thursdays of each month. So our next meeting will happen on May 6th. And as you know, KubeCon takes place between May 4th and 7th. And since it's in Europe, it may not conflict with our meeting. I haven't checked exact times. So my question is, like, should we cancel it or should we have it and see how many people can make it, and we can have a short meeting or the usual meeting depending on the participation? Question. I take this as keep as is. Okay, the next topic is CDCon schedule and announcement. Tracy, you want to take this or? I don't hear you.
Sorry. Start again.
Okay.
So yeah, just pleased to announce that after working with the program committee and going through all the amazing talks folks submitted, we have the final program out for CDCon, as well as the additional events. So GitOps Summit the day before, and Spinnaker Summit, which is running in parallel throughout the conference. So encourage folks to go ahead and register. Thanks. I can see lots of folks on this call who submitted talks that were excellent and were selected. And I think we'll be adding on additional things to that program, and very likely having a birds of a feather session for this group as a chance to summarize all activities and particularly welcome new folks and get them involved. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and register and let me know if there are any questions. But yeah, we're very much looking forward to a great event in June.
Thanks, Tracy. When I was looking at the schedule, actually, I noticed an interoperability talk given by someone I haven't seen in our meetings or in CDF, like other meetings. So it was interesting to see an interoperability talk coming from another person who is interested in this area. So which was great to see actually. So that is all, and we have all the links here: CDCon, GitOps, and Spinnaker Summit schedules, and also registration link. And I think when you go to registration, you can register all three on the same registration flow. So they are there. And that is all. Just last time, anyone wants to bring up a quick topic before we start with SPDX and give the floor to Kate? Okay. So Kate, welcome again. I can stop sharing, and if you want to share something, please do that.
Yep.
And I stop talking as well. Thanks.
Okay. Yep, just waiting. There we go. Take it now. So I basically pulled together a bit of an overview. Software bill of materials is so just a bit about my background. I work at the Linux Foundation and have been involved in SPDX since way before I even joined the Linux Foundation, and have continued my interest in it. I also work on Zephyr and on Elisa and a variety of other sort of embedded projects. That tends to be my area. But SPDX is something that emerged from a problem I had to solve back when I was, and other people had to solve, quite frankly, too, back when I was doing software development kits when I was at Freescale. And my colleagues at Wind River and Monte Vista had the same problems. And then I talked to people at Linux Foundation, and we found out that a bunch of other people on the legal side had the same problem too. So we started Software Package Data Exchange off to exchange software bill of materials about the open source software we're shipping. However, the concept has sort of been evolved from there and is useful in other domains rather than just licensing. In particular, there are three perspectives across the supply chain, and everyone's pretty much hearing these days about software supply chain attacks. But there's people who produce software, those who choose it, and those who are operating it. And each of those perspectives has different needs for an SBOM. The ones that's hitting the news right now, obviously, is, am I affected by a vulnerability? Having an accurate software bill of materials for what's actually on your system lets you be able to automatically query this type of information and understand what's there. And so certainly things like SolarWinds, that's been pretty prominent in the news and visible. How do we get to understand what's there and have the information available? And speeding up. So an SBOM will not solve SolarWinds, okay? However, an SBOM would help you figure out whether or not you are impacted. Is kind of what happens in this case. There's other solutions for solving SolarWinds, and that's a whole other talk. But anyhow, the challenge though is that the cost for remediation is going up. And so there's a lot of people getting very interested in it. There's rumors of an executive order coming down in the next couple of months about improving some of the supply chain issues, and SBOMs are expected to feature as part of that. So we'll see if it emerges or not, but these are some of the things I'm sort of tracking. However, Black Duck just came out with their open source, Synopsys' open source risk report this week. And so I updated the slide for this one, but at this point now it's 98% of the code bases of open source and 75% of that code that they audited was open source. And you see that they're referencing the fact that the risk aspects of licensing as well as vulnerabilities coming in. So Sonatype is seeing the same thing from a component side. Challenges, most people aren't able to accurately summarize what's running on their system. XKCD is a wonderful source of truth. And this problem down here at the, what's hiding underneath there is what we're trying to have SBOMs be able to help us solve. So there's been an initiative from NTIA for the last couple of years, and they've done a lot to raise awareness of the fact that we need to have this software bill of materials in the supply chain to help deal with the vulnerability issue. From their perspective, it's, just basically the relationships between the components. And with that information, we can do a lot more than we have today. So we obviously want it automated. Pretty much, there's reasons to make SBOMs in any point in time in the supply cycle, in the software supply cycle. There is obviously, as we're doing our development and build and CI/CD pipelines, this is an area that's obviously rich to generate as we go along and have a good source of truth at the end of it all. But you're sort of seeing the awareness raised right now because of the cybersecurity aspects. And so having an accurate SBOM is going to help with that. And we're also now starting to see regulatory. The FDA has signaled they are starting to expect an SBOM for medical devices. The energy sector is also has NERC 13 out there. And in Europe, we're having the ENISA cybersecurity for cloud services starting to show up, having an SBOM. Mind you, they expanded it as software board of materials as opposed to bill of materials, but we think this is a typo. But you're also seeing cybersecurity risk chain management. This is from the energy sector. And they're starting to expect this. So the energy sector is getting quite interested. And there's various proof of concepts going on in that space, as are in the medical space for using SBOMs and sharing SBOMs. So it is useful for many different other facets as well. Some people may have heard of the Open Chain project. It's expecting you to create a bill of materials as part of what you're sharing. And there's a lot of adoption of Open Chain now in various large organizations. So being able to automate and create these bill of materials with some degree of confidence is a goal that we sort of need for the industry, and the financial sector is saying this. You know, if they have it, it saves some time for vulnerability detection. Now, the challenge we've got is there's a lot of different formats. That, you know, quite frankly, it's, you know, emails, text things, spreadsheets, etc. And everyone for a long period of time was asking for something different. This was my problem back 10 years ago. Is, you know, I had my data in one form, and Wind River had it in another form, and Monte Vista had it in a third. And we had no formal way of sharing the information. So this is still pretty much valid. And so at the heart of a minimum viable per SBOM, it's these fields: so supplier name, a component, unique identifier, version string, component hash, and relationship, and whoever created the SBOM. There's work going on to extend beyond this just minimum set right now in the NTIA working groups that are focusing on this. But all the formats that they accept or you know, approve, etc., can support at least this. And so the three formats that are endorsed at this point in time, or at least, you know, referenced to, are SPDX, SWID, and CycloneDX. So I'm obviously going to be talking to you about SPDX, but I just want you to know that there's a landscape here, and it is important to understand that interoperability between these is going to be important as well down the road, because there's different purposes behind them. But to make things effective in pipelines and like CI/CD and so forth, tooling is going to be required, and people need to be able to produce them. And ideally, this is all produced automatically as part of a build. That is the best case, because then there's probably the most truth into it. Sometimes you may need to analyze it after the fact, like binary inspections or tools like Physiology. Those are options, and sometimes you need to potentially even edit things in manually. All of these are areas where we've got it. And then, you know, if you create it, you need to be able to consume it, and potentially you need to be able to do some transformations. Specifically, you need to consume it to do assessments for policies. So if you wanted to decide whether or not you were going to deploy an image, there may be information in the SBOM as to whether, you know, have the right versions of a certain package been used, or any of the packages contained in there associated with known vulnerabilities that have not been remediated, things like that. So produce and consume are pretty common cases, and sometimes you may want to augment them information with things like, you know, details of vulnerabilities. So there's a growing set of tools for supporting these three different formats. And the SPDX one, I'll go into a bit more detail. And in these locations, there's a basic template about talking about the functionality, where you can find it and so forth. So since I'm coming back at it from the CSPDX, this is sort of how we're looking at some things in the Linux Foundation right now, or parts of the Linux Foundation that care about compliances. We're sort of looking at trying to get common tooling available, using this common data format, and then making sure we have common processes and norms working together. That's kind of where the focus is going. And feel free to interrupt me anytime. So I just want to touch on the OpenChain spec if you're not familiar with it. It's now an ISO standard. It became one last December. And so it's easier for people to specify in procurement. So I think this will help with adoption. Software Package Data Exchange is SPDX. Its current version is 2.2.1 actually. And it has actually gone through balloting at ISO at this point in time, and you can actually find it now on their site for the DIS version. And so it's on its way to becoming an ISO standard. This is what we're trying to work for with this one as well. So just to give you a bit of history, is we started working under FOSS Bazaar in 2010. And this August will be our 10th anniversary of the specification being out there. And bit by bit, we've been adding use cases. So as people are trying to represent certain pieces of metadata associated with software, we've been trying to make sure we can represent their use cases either with what features that are there already, or we start adding in fields and sections. And so we have been evolving this pretty much through this period of time with a variety of stakeholders coming in and out as their interest, are on certain topics to make sure that they can use things. It's fairly well adopted in most tools and large companies. We've got a fair amount of adoption there in their internal systems. So lining around the fields and information there. Now, the other thing we've been doing in the last release in particular is for a long time, we just had RDF and these three formats. And in 2.2, we've added JSON, YAML, and XML. And this was possible because it's all modeled underneath the covers. And so there's a coherent data model for the fields. And so this lets us do the transformations into these different formats, which helps with the adoption. And the ACT projects are ones that are all committed to working with SPDX as their interchange right now. And the SPDX project itself has tools for reading and writing various libraries. So there's tooling in there that can be pulled from. And if you learn of a tool that's not on this list, you can feel free to consult it. If you learn of one, feel free to add. But I think what I really wanted to talk to you guys about, now that I've given you the background of where we are, is what's happening with SPDX3, in the sense that we're refactoring the specification into a base, which will align closer with the NTIA, so you don't have to carry fields you don't care about, and then various profiles for these domains of interest. And in particular, there's a fair amount of interest of having something for pedigree and provenance. And this is where I'm very interested in the use cases you guys are coming up with, and to make sure whatever we're coming up with is going to be coherent. So as I go through this, if there's questions, please just interrupt me. I'm just trying to, I was told to keep it to about half an hour, so I'm trying to do that. So if I've been going too fast, too, feel free to tell me to go back up if there's questions as well. But this is kind of where we're sort of heading. To give you a little bit more feel for this, the base is going to have elements of artifacts being packages, files, and snippets, which we have today already. We are probably extending our identity ability and making that a bit more richer and automated, and adding some abstractions in to support that. And we'd had one-to-one relationships, but there was a strong desire for some of the use cases to switch them over to one-to-many. So we've been modeling and working on that. And the SPDX document will become a document itself is one of the directions we've been going. So there is various in base, we're looking at things like external document refs and to refer to another document. So you can link these documents together. This is already there today. So for things that have like a complex hierarchy, you can put things together in stages and then link them at the end. And so build them up, and that's a valid way of building up these SPDX documents. You can also refer out to other external repositories like, Maven, NPM, the CPEs from the National Vulnerability Database, Pearls, package URLs, and then software heritage IDs as well have been added as references. But if there's other things that make sense to link out to for augmenting information, definitely are interested in those cases as well. And then there's a group working on improving the integrity methods. We already have hashes, and we already have hashes on groupings as part of the specification. But again, interested in use cases and interested in seeing if we can satisfy them.
A quick question on that.
Sure.
How are you considering anything along the lines with Docker images? You know how if a Docker image can inherit from another Docker image as part of the build. Is that in your scope, or is that outside of a scope as an artifact?
It's in the scope. Like I say, we want to be able to represent everything that happens in a build eventually. Okay. And we need experts in these areas to help us flesh this out properly. It's kind of what's coming down to. We have VMware pretty active with us on the container infrastructure and how we can represent things effectively. But we don't have we need more expertise in the Docker instances and in some of the build information, which is why I'm here, because I think you guys probably have some of the knowledge we need to pull in. So this is, this is an eye chart at this point in time, but this is sort of, our model has sort of evolved into this for the base at this point. And then you can sort of see that we're sort of have a software profile emerging, which is effectively these two plus the licensing is what's an SPDX 2.2. But we are making certain elements and aspects richer and evolving them. So the licensing profile, the heart of it's going to be, this is sort of there today. There's a declared license and things. There's a concluded license, and then there's some copyright text. And you could be wanting this level of information at a package, a file, or even at a snippet level. So we've been extending the model to make this possible. It's it's sort of there today, but it's a lot of fields, and so we're trying to simplify certain things. And one of the things that's pretty powerful in SPDX is you do have the ability to use an and or to actually describe and figure out the relationships between licenses and software. There's also the concept of none and no assertion that you can use in this expression syntax. So when something is not known completely, or you don't want to make an assertion, there's that option. But if and if there's nothing there and it's nothing there and you want to say that, you have that option too. So we do have, because these are things that are interesting from a risk and from a deployment perspective. If you have not complied with the licenses, people do not want to deploy the software. It causes a lot of problems when you do otherwise. So making that automated, making it easier to do is obviously something we still want to preserve and potentially even improve. And the modeling that's being worked on from the licensing side is roughly looking like this at this point. And from the licensing, there's also a license list, which a lot of people know for SPDX. And we're just actually, 3.12 came out recently. Sorry, I need to update that slide too. But 3.13 is probably going to be coming out at the end of the month. And so any license that's commonly in open source, we can put in. Yeah, go for it.
Is it okay to interrupt?
Yeah, yes, please. I hate listening to my own voice.
Most software projects have been involved with open source or internal, doesn't matter. Usually adhere to a single license. In fact, I'm having a hard time imagining how would I create a project that adheres to multiple licenses. But are you talking about licenses that are part of your open source that you're using and you're kind of graphing it out, or is it just your own software?
I'm talking about the open source that's out there. People have this assumption that a project is just at, if a project declares a license at one level, that's what it stays at. Lots of people bring open source from one project to another. and they carry the license of the origination with them into these other projects. And to a large extent, things are compatible. Hopefully the project's checking to make sure things are compatible, but if you actually go and start digging into what's out there, you will find it's rather rare to just see the license for the project actually consistently used throughout the project.
Okay, understand. Now I'm getting it. It's you're trying to graph out everything that a particular project uses, and it's it's very likely that you'll run into incompatibilities between licenses. So yeah, okay, thank you.
And the same way, you need to do it on security in some ways. One of there's a nice little, thing that people comfort themselves with is, oh, if we just map out what's happening at the package level and our relationships between that, we'll be able to solve things. The challenge is that when the images you build may or may not have vulnerabilities in it, depending on the options you're giving it and the configs you're giving it. And being able to be definitive about things like that is costing, taking a lot of effort. So, I don't see the ecosystem switching to the higher fidelity immediately. I'd quite frankly be happy to get them to have SBOMs for the packages, but realistically over time, I do think we're going to need to get to the source level, at least on some critical components for critical infrastructure. Because like Amnesia 33, when it came out last year, the Zephyr project actually used FNet in the LTS version of it, not in the current version, but the LTS version. However, we could not assert, we had to basically put out an advisory saying, hey, we're not affected here, because we were not using that part of the code in the images that were Zephyr, that Zephyr could build from. But I can see that people go and build applications and they are using parts of things, and the parts are not impacted, but the vulnerabilities are out at the package level. And so, we're going to be having issues trying to tease this all apart and improve the fidelity.
And just to give another example of the dual licensing, you'll see it with like a artwork or an image. They'll license it under like a Creative Commons, and then they'll dual license it under like an Apache as well. So you'll get pieces of code within the package that are dual licensed. It may not be on purpose, but it does happen.
Well, if you go actually and look at the licensing in Linux, you'll see about 30 licenses in there right now. So there's a lot of key components that these things have come into, and keeping an active eye on not letting incompatible licenses in is something that projects do. Some projects pay attention to more than others, I guess I could say.
Well, will the model change slightly to deal with the scenario that you're talking about, where you have individual licenses at the source level within a package, or is that already handled?
Already handled. Okay. We can even represent individual licenses at the snippet level if we need to.
Okay.
Because one of the common things that happens in composition systems, specifically in the Java space, is people will assemble their code from places, so to speak, and the composition, they're taking snippets from places and they're putting it there, and they're not paying attention necessarily to the licensing. And so some of the source code analysis tools find these elements out and say, hey, the correct provenance for this is it came from this project. You should be using this license for this part.
Got it. So thank you.
We added that in about 5 years ago for the use cases. So licensing is fairly well handled. One of the things that we are getting pressure towards, and so there's a group in Japan that's sort of focusing on this and taking the lead here, is usage. Being able to sort of, along with an image and its metadata, say what you're allowed to do with it and be able to send that through the supply chain. The motivating use case for this is the automotive sector, where they want to give people permission to use software in testing, but not take it to production. So, as you're building up your, cars and automotives and all the software in there, you need to be able to, pull all these pieces together. And if a component hasn't been qualified to the right level, they may not want it going to production. So you want to be able to signal that somehow. And similar case is end of life. Being able to convey this is very common in the commercial space, but, and, you know, open source projects have end of lives too, but people don't know how to convey that information. So being able to convey these type of information through the supply chain with the software when you're actually making it, and when there are known end of lives, will hopefully let us see when there's weaknesses and issues showing up faster. So this group is meeting and you know, looking at that and adding other sort of concepts that are appropriate for policy decisions, and things that people want.
Because you used the keyword there, policy. I am coming from telco sector, and in telco, there are lots of conversations about policy governance and such things. And some of the things you highlighted now and in previous slides, like, could this software be put on production because it has some, you know, dependency use that is end of life? No, it can't go to production, because if someone wants to call 911, and this may cause failure for it because like no bugs fixed in that dependency. So it's like, now, because why I'm talking about policy now is like, our next topic is policy, and like I shouldn't say I never, but I didn't really think about connection between like the metadata and policy at this level. I was like talking about dependency stuff, but not on this level.
Well,
so it's
dependencies. I think on this deck to show you, but dependencies in SPDX are relationships. Okay, and we have a whole, and I'll bring up the spec and I'll show you the whole set of ones we've got defined. But this is the data you need for policies, and I want to make sure that all the policy data, so it can be automated, so that we can be pulling this stuff in, and the policies can be assessing it and making intelligent decisions without, you know, a lot of manual intervention. I think that's where we need to get to for this, and so coming up with these standard formats and being able to share these things across the ecosystem, from open source and free tools all the way through proprietary into, you know, individual companies, organizations, is, you know, the ecosystem we've got to sort of shift by, you know, aligning around a few things. Vulnerabilities, there's a group that wants to start capturing some of the vulnerability information and assertions about it in there. And so Thomas Steenbergen from here.com and is basically, he's also one of the leads on the OSS Review Toolkit, or ORT. And they're actively, you know, having that tooling available to be used with builds and so forth. And he's got the use cases to start catching the vulnerabilities. So if people are interested in that and some of those discussions, that's actively ongoing. We're trying to keep it interoperable with Cyclone DX and how they do it. And CSAF group is basically revising their spec. That's coming in from the Oasis side, and they've got some terminology that they're doing. So we're trying to align in with what is emerging as well, or at least what people are trying to standardize on in other groups, so that we have something that's going to be hopefully coherent between these different organizations. From linkage, this is sort of the relationships and connect. And we've had relationships right now in current spec. We're thinking about looking at making a first order object with additional properties. And this is kind of where the container folks like Lasker and Nisha and so forth are focusing on to make sure that their use cases can be represented effectively, and that we have the right level of hierarchy and naming. You know, how do you deal with layers? How do you deal with, you know, all these components from build artifacts in the intermediate forms, and what you're putting together for your final image? You know, what are we going to capture? Things like that. So there's linkage that's coming into there. And I'll bring this back up right now just to go through it after I finish these slides. But the whole aspect of pedigree and provenance, we sort of consider it, you have your upstream supplier or a third party, you've got your CI flow in your organization, and then you have your downstream consumer or customers or redeploy inside an organization. So if we take a look at that model, we're pretty much considering pedigree to be everything that's going through your build, and provenance is who has had, you know, who's had their hands on it as it's been going through the supply chain effectively for your components. And so, you know, that's kind of the definitions we're working with right now. And there's people who want to get together on this one for discussing this. I've been in discussions already with the reproducible build folk. I want to make sure we've got enough information from that. And I kind of like to be working with you guys or some volunteers from you guys to make sure that we've got enough information that's coming out of the continuous delivery and these, CI/CD flows so that the, deployment can be effective for the policies. So I want to certainly make sure we align in on terminology that's being used and ideally help define it from some of the work you guys are doing. And then provenance is okay as it's moving between people. How do we have assurance that, people haven't been sabotaging it along the way? The combination of the pedigree and the provenance is probably what we're going to be needing to add into the SBOMs to solve SolarWinds properly and down the road.
Do you see blockchain coming into play to deal with the signing and the hashing for assurance?
Mm-hmm. There is a project called SPARTS or Software Parts that Wind River put into the Hyperledger incubator. There is another project that's called, it's information stage right now, called DBOM or Digital Bill of Materials, which can be using distributed ledger technologies as well as IOTA and so forth. The other project that's emerging is Alvarium, that's looking at trust fabrics. And so what I'm trying to do with SPDX is try to make sure we've got the data to feed all of these. For DBOM, it's basically looking at encapsulation of the information and then attesting to the identities in the provenance. So you can sort of share from one to another. And I can give a talk on that or get others to give a talk on that too. And what's happening in that project. So I guess the conclusion I had is it's in development now. Well, like I say, you'll be hearing noise in the summer, probably about SPDX coming out of ISO, but we're working on the next generation for it. And what I want to do is make sure we have the right use cases so that when we come out with SPDX 3, towards the end of year next year, somewhere in that range, it'll be useful for people starting to work on policies. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Hopefully that was coherent.
Okay, this is Tracy from Deploy Hub and Ortelius. I know that probably most of the people on this call are getting excited about this talk, but this is what, Steve and I have, thought about how to present this data for quite some time. So thank you so much for being here and going through what you're up to. We are integrating with SPDX and Cyclone. From the point, if a build has the data in it, we're pulling it into Ortelius. So and then we roll it up at the logical application level. So all of this can be shown from a microservice perspective, everything that the logical application is consuming.
Cool.
So the good news is we've already started from the CDF side of the house. We have already started to think about this and done some integration. I sent you a LinkedIn invite. Maybe we can connect and we'll show you what we're up to.
I'd love to see what you're up to. So just to give you a feel for the richness of the relationships we've come up with over time. And it's very easy to potentially add a relationship. Just give us the use case as to what you're trying to represent and let us convince you that it can't be, and then, we have the discussion to make sure we can't capture it with something that's there logically, and then we'll probably add it to the next version. We're not trying to be very thing, but, we have things like dependency manifests that people have wanted to be able to be explicit about. And build dependency, dev dependencies, and then optional test dependency, runtime dependencies, examples of generated from, so forth. So if there's something you want to try to articulate with a relationship between two entities, and it's not here, please open an issue. The spec itself is being developed here. Spec here, it's all in Markdown. Well, slow thing. And you can, this is most of the work right now is happening in the discussions in the meetings, and we have our minutes up on GitHub now. It used to be on Wiki. We had 10 years of meeting history on wikis, but we've got it up on GitHub now. But you can sort of go through and go into the chapters and sort of understand what's happening. It renders nicely in the other version you saw, but if you sort of looked at, there's the relationships here, relationships between SPDX elements. You'll see that it's in Markdown. It's actually just in, it's just raw Markdown, and then we render it appropriately. But go ahead and open issues to what you need it to be like. And the issues, if there's a use case you can't represent or you're not sure how to represent, just go in and open an issue here against the spec. And we'll be working on closing most of these off as part of the next release.
Could you jump back to your other tab? I just didn't get the repo. Yeah, that one.
Sure, it's spdx.github.io.
Okay.
And /spdx spec -spec. And like I say, it is just rendered from our GitHub.
Right. It's just sometimes it's easier to
read
through the rendered.
By far, that's why we did it. And the aspects of the specification,
Kate, would you mind grabbing that URL and putting it in the chat?
No, I would not mind having the URL at all and putting it in the chat. Okay. Well, let me just go to the relationship, since that's probably where you're most interested in anyhow.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Now let me find the chat in this. There we go.
That's always a challenge.
Yeah, you might have to. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
And I'll put the spec one in at the same time too, in case you've got questions and issues. The tech call meets every week, and this is where we're working on SPDX3. So if you've got ideas and proposals for the pedigree at some point in time, I'm more than willing to spin up a separate meeting, ad hoc meetings with people who are interested in it, to start talking and putting a proposal together to present to the Tuesday group for alignment in with the rest of it for the pedigrees. I'd like to get a starting point. So if there's someone who wants to work with me on that, I would welcome it. Or if you want to point me at some of the stuff you've got already that I should see if I can incorporate, having further meetings, I'd be happy to do.
Yeah, let's just, we'll follow up with you. Connect with me on LinkedIn and we'll figure out a time.
Okay, great, Tracy. Thank you. So hopefully that gave you guys a bit of a feel.
Kate, you mentioned about the policies that can be applied onto this data. Is there an effort right now to do some package policies with non kind of checks, or it's going to be open, but there is some framework that you would do that people can easily use to extend?
So the policies and the framework for the policies, there's work going on in usage. I think there's going to be work going on in usage. Basically, we've been talking to some of the security people, and they have various risk policies and risk management policies. And so I think they're sort of gravitating around usage at this point in time. But there was, other policies that are out there are things like, the Graphius and Critis stuff that was Google was working on, or is still working on, in Toto, so as well. So we're trying to pull in the right levels of metadata so that policies can work, but we do not have a policy engine for evaluation that we've standardized on yet, if that's what you're asking. Okay. I'm just focusing on the data, getting data organized and lined up. That's a big problem on its own still. But DBOM there's people in DBOM that may be wanting to work on this because they've got the node aspect, but it may be coming in from the commercial side. I can't tell.
Right. The Google Anthos is also using this open policy agent, and that's one of the projects there.
Google Anthos. How does Anthos relate to Critis then?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
How does, so I think I need to talk to you, Gopinath, and I'm trying to understand Anthos versus Critis. So I'll need to figure that one out.
No, it's only relation on how the policies are implemented in lines. The data is a data layer, right? So once you figure out which process you will use, and then based on the data, you can apply those kind of structure to it.
Okay, cool. The other thing I'd like to talk, you were talking at the start about your Rosetta. I probably should take and look through this and also line up and see if to some extent we can align terminologies, or at least highlight where there's a difference of when people are using the same term and meaning slightly different things.
Yeah, it's always the case. Yeah.
I know, I'm sure. But yeah, so because we've got people busy, defining what they want in the SPDX world based on things that they're coming in from their perspectives. So I would not mind. Thanks for giving me that link. Appreciate it. I'll take that back into the SPDX working group and get them to have a review and see if we can highlight anything that's a jar that we might want to have a discussion with you guys on too.
Yeah, that's the link I put, vocabulary.md. It kind of looks at the terms used across different CI/CD technologies. And as I mentioned, we have this glossary repo, which I put the link there. I think it's Christy Wilson started that repo, and I think more general terms are being collected there. There is an open pull request there. So both of these documents could be good, check and see.
Yep. No. So we've also one of the lead for the base profile, the base part of the profile or the core part is actually William Bartholomew from GitHub. And so they're pretty engaged in this as well with us. And yeah, and GitLab has got their stuff too. Cool. Thank you for those links. I appreciate them. Happy to share back and forth. No problem at all.
Yeah,
that's great.
Can you put the link to slides? Can you share them with us so we can store them in our presentation repo for the people who missed this?
Yep, I can share just a second. Let me just open it up. And if you think you actually might use it, I will put commentability on it so that we can talk about things in future, if you think that's helpful.
I think, yeah, if we could comment on that, then you can see what kind of questions coming out from us.
That's kind of what I'm sort of thinking here is with, and like I say, this is just okay. Anyone with the link then can comment. It's how we're going to do it. Okay, and done. And there you go.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So I want to, I don't know if you have seen, Kate, the HackMD document we had for the standardized metadata. This is how, we got in touch with you as well. Let me show that page, because we are again, within our group, we are a bit beginning of this, work, I must say. And now I hope you can see this document now. And we just start talking about what kind of metadata we produce and consume within our CI/CD flows. And as you will see, some brain dumps here, and then thanks to Steve and others, we start putting metadata for commits and artifacts, because we want to be a bit pragmatic, instead of trying to document everything, we focused on commit and artifact. So my question to everyone actually is, does it make sense us to continue capturing our thoughts in this document? And then, as you suggested, maybe we can have this time meetings and come and discuss about the stuff that's happening within this group and things. And
yeah, I'd say if that's the link, I certainly am willing to take a pass myself through and say, hey, this is what's in SPDX right now that matches what I think you're going after. And you can use JSON and YAML. You don't need to use the other formats. So hopefully it's something that's potentially, super easy for you guys to work with in your flows already. But it's just, let's see if we can standardize on the field so that, no one has to do a translation at the end. Cool.
And yeah.
Kind of from my viewpoint is, what SPDX has for definitions and those pieces we should look at those first and then see if we can bring those into our vocabulary and if they make sense, instead of going the other way where we're starting from the ground up and trying to then cross-reference back to the SPDX definition. So that's my viewpoint.
That actually makes more sense.
Well, happy to get, like I say, if there's a group that's sort of meeting to work through this, I'm happy to sort of attend and help do the translation and have a sort of a discussion that way. Just let me know how I can help, because I think if we can get everything sort of unified at this point in time, our life is going to all be a lot easier. We'll make those policies, we want those policies to be running.
I just want to pull in Andrea, Emil, and Matthias, because please correct me, Andrea, Emil, Matthias, you also work on similar stuff as part of your event glossary or vocabulary and events, meta and data stuff, I think, or I misunderstood.
Yes, sure, we are. Yes, we are. And we're taking a lot of input, of course, from the vocabulary document that you pasted there before as well, and from different solutions that exist already. We focused on, to Katie, on event-specific, on event data that can be sent from any CI/CD pipeline system. So for sure, the metadata that we send out in those events are very much related to what you talk about here, and we will for sure consider the SPDX as input to this work as well, of course. And we could maybe
please contribute back if there's things you see that you've already captured that no one else has captured in SPDX. You know, put the proposal in to standardize on it that way.
We will for sure keep it in our minds when we progress on. I think we will collaborate a bit more.
Oh, great. Nice vocabulary draft. Cool.
Okay, I think this was great. Like, yeah, we finally got in touch with the work you are doing there. So while like the next topic is actually related to what you touched during the SPDX discussion presentation, Gopinath also mentioned. So I want to highlight this as well. This policy-driven CD started again a few months ago, or perhaps end of 2020. I don't exactly remember. And in this document, we are trying to collect the approaches from various communities and technologies to policy. And like one part of this is like the actual data, and the other part is the framework aspects, like how to consume that data and how to take decisions based on policies. So again, this is like it looked like on the side, but now I feel this has lots of relations to metadata topic as well. And Gopinath, if you want, please take a look at this one as well, because like we are trying to collect how communities or companies approach policy on this document, which could give us a chance to see a trend. Like what we observed now is like open policy agent seems to be becoming the thing in policy area.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I will.
Okay. And the last contribution we got to this was from Harness, actually. We got how Harness, approaches to policy, and they leverage OPA, and they also have some implicit way of handling policies. So please take a look at that one as well. And that was all about the policy topic as well. So we have 2 minutes left. Anyone wants to bring up anything? Okay, thank you, Kate. Thanks a lot for joining and presenting SPDX and for the discussion. I think we have lots of opportunities to work on this metadata data topic and see where we end up coming months, years, perhaps.
Yeah, as you see, it's not been something that's immediately happened. It's been a long time in happening in what we've done so far, and I can see this. As people create new things, we need new ways to represent it.
You said 10 years, the 10th year anniversary, and then I realized I shouldn't say weeks, months. I should say years.
Thank you. Okay,
Okay,
looking forward
so
to catching up with you more.
thank you. So our next meeting will be on 6th of May. We will skip the meeting on last Thursday because we are meeting first and third Thursdays of the month. So until then, take care of everyone and talk to you in a few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks. Bye.